Hello, everyone. We're going to do a quick set of notes on the second inaugural address, which is a speech by Abraham Lincoln. And you're going to read this speech today, but I wanted to give you a rundown of what we're actually studying within this particular text. So when we're analyzing argumentative texts, there are a couple things that we're going to look at. Abraham Lincoln's second inaugural address was delivered in Washington, D.C., right as the American Civil War was, it says continuing to rage in your book, but in reality, we were turning towards the end, and people knew, or they had a very good idea that the Union Army or the anti-slavery army was going to win the war. So this is an argumentative speech. And Lincoln is making an argument to his fellow countrymen for the best way to move forward with the country. So what he's speaking about is after the war ends, what are we going to do? How are we going to fix this? Because remember, we went from being a unified country to we broke into two separate countries, and now he's going to try to put the two different parts back together. And as if you remember from the first set of notes that we took on this, it doesn't go all that well. So what are argumentative texts? Now, before I get into this, I want to talk about when we're discussing argumentative text, this does not just mean a written argument. It can be a speech. It can be a YouTube video. It can be a documentary. Okay? Arguments are literally everywhere. We happen to be reading a speech this time, and on the SAT and on College Board exams, the AP language exam, for example, they mostly focus on speeches, but these arguments are everywhere. So don't be surprised moving forward, which we will do this, if we look at some photographs, for example. So argumentative texts enable writers to express a position on a particular issue. It means the person writing that text or delivering that speech or whatever is taking a stand on an issue. When you're analyzing an argument, it's important to identify and analyze its structural elements, which we'll go into on the next slide. So what are some examples of arguments? We literally see these all the times, but the legal driving age should be moved to, raised or lowered, whatever. People should let the government control their lives, etc. Okay, you can, and everywhere you turn, there's an argument. So structural elements of an argument, we know a few of these. For example, you should all know what a claim or thesis is, and you should know what evidence is. But we're going to go over them again because our book does mention them, and I tried to give you, if you have some confusion on these topics, some relevant examples. So first element we're going to look for is what is the claim or the thesis, the main claim or the thesis of this argument. What exactly is the person trying to argue? So it is the expression of the writer's position on an issue. Where do they stand? Are they for something? Are they against something? Are they somewhere in the middle? Whatever. For example, if people practice social distancing, the coronavirus will not spread. This is the general claim of most governments right now, and most people actually. Now, evidence is, as we should all know, the specific information such as facts, quotes, and examples that support the thesis. For example, coronavirus is spread through the contact of people. If people do not come in contact with one another, it won't spread. And we have, obviously, you can find more detailed statistics on this to support this and how viruses are spread and etc. But you're giving specific information, statistics, what other people said, etc. to support whatever it is your main thesis is. Now, the next term is a little bit new for us, although we might be familiar with it, and that's appeal. Appeal is a persuasive method intended to influence the beliefs of the audience. Now, when we're appealing to somebody, you may remember we discussed ethos, pathos, and logos. Pathos, for example, is an emotional appeal where we're trying to get people to feel something. There are other types of appeals, like the bandwagoning technique, which is where, well, everybody's doing it, so I need to do it, right? But we're mostly focused when we're discussing these arguments on emotional appeals logical appeals, and appeals to character or ethical appeals. So my example for you here is people will die if we do not practice social distancing. If we do not practice social distancing, our loved ones will die. Sorry, that's worded funny in my PowerPoint. But if we don't practice social distancing, the people that are closest to us are going to end up dying. That's an emotional appeal because we're trying to get our audience to feel something. Do you really want the people that are closest to you to die? Like, that's something that if you say to somebody, it puts it into perspective. It makes them have that emotional feeling of, oh my gosh, no, I don't want that to happen. So that is, in essence, an appeal. Now, the last term is a call to action. You will find these in persuasive essays 100% of the time. And you will find them in argumentative essays, but sometimes they're a little more discreet. Because in argumentative essays, they tend to be a little less biased in theory, meaning personal pronouns such as I don't come into play. You're thinking more in a scientific, mathematic realm, statistics realm, I should say. So a call to action is an attempt to convince the audience to do something based on the argument. You want them to take an action at the end of your argument. For example, my call to action in this whole example with coronavirus would be everybody needs to practice social distancing now. Like, if this is all we have to do to save people's lives, then stay at home. Like, don't go to the mall, don't go bowling, whatever. Okay? Call to actions can be you want people to donate money. You want people to to have a life savings or whatever it is that relates to your argument. You want them to then do something at the end. Your whole point of your speech is to get them to do this action at the end. Now, like I said, argumentative essays can be a little bit more discreet, so the call to action can be a little more difficult to find. As we're persuasive essays, obviously we're trying to persuade you to do something, so it might literally say, do this thing. Genre elements, seeing as we're going to read a speech, if we're looking at genre elements of a speech, they include a clear claim or thesis, supports ideas with evidence, which again is just like a regular argument, but where we have a slight change on the end is it makes a call to action to the audience. A speech will always have a call to action if it's an argumentative speech, because, not an informative speech, it's a little bit different, but people don't... You don't speak for no reason. So if you hear a politician speaking, they're saying or they're claiming something, and they're going to have a to-do at the end. Even if that to-do is vote for me, that's still, they're calling you to do something. They want you to vote for them, okay? So in speeches, you should very well be looking for a call to action. Now, I'm going to go back a hot second. With these examples, feel free to use a chart like this in your notes as you read the second inaugural address, because you should be able to identify these elements at a bare minimum in any argument that you read, and it would be good practice to do it for this text, okay, for your own benefit. Now, analyzing author's purpose. We know author's purpose is the reason why an author composed or wrote a text. The purpose of an argumentative text is to persuade the audience to believe in or do something. Now, if we know that the author's purpose in some sort of way is to persuade us to do something, we should be looking for how exactly is it that they've done that. If you think back to when we did our SAT essays at the very beginning of the year, it was like in the first 2 weeks, one of the biggest struggles that I said we had overall, after I read through everybody's essay, was that you did not identify how the author came to their conclusion. What devices did they use? This specific lesson, especially if you're going to take the writing SAT, will be beneficial to you. Okay? So you need to pay attention to what are we looking for when we're analyzing arguments, because not only is this important in English class, it's literally important everywhere. For those of you that are from the US, you use these same skills when you analyze who should I vote for? What politician is the best? You have to use the same skills to analyze somebody's speech as you do analyzing a written text. Now, if you're not from a country like this, politics are literally everywhere, so you can still analyze what's out there, but you can also use it to analyze just the media. How do you know what news outlet to trust? So these are not skills that, oh, I'm just kind of learning them in English, whatever, I'm never going to use them again. They're skills that are applicable in your everyday life, even after you graduate. So an author may use rhetorical devices to help achieve their purpose. Now, the term rhetorical devices means techniques that influence the way a text is understood by the audience. You can think of this as a play in the structure or a play in words, but more or less rhetorical devices are used to help the reader or help the audience digest the material at hand. In this particular speech, Lincoln uses diction, parallelism, and allusions. Now, diction refers to the words that writers choose to include. They choose specific words over other ones, maybe to describe certain things, right? When we're looking at diction, it can be as simple as using the word dog as opposed to describing a demon-like creature that bites, or using a demon-like creature that bites instead of the word dog, right? You choose to describe something in a certain way, okay? So this is diction, the specific word choice that the author uses. Now, parallelism, which I believe we mentioned in a previous lesson, but it is kind of complicated, so we're going to go over it again. Parallelism is the use of similar grammatical constructions to express ideas that are related. Now, what I mean by this is, if you look at the example on the left, I like singing, kayaking, and dancing. These three words are in the same form. This is parallelism. If you look right above that line, it says, I like singing, kayaking, and to dance. To dance is not in the same form, okay? Now, parallelism can also relate to the structure of sentences, like back-to-back sentences, if they have subject, verb, and then another subject, and then the next line has subject, verb, subject, or you have an independent clause, dependent clause, and the structures are exactly the same in the next sentence, then that's also parallelism. So it doesn't just mean within one sentence, it can be multiple sentences back to back also. Lastly, he uses allusions. Allusions are quotations or references to a familiar person, place, event, or literary work. Most commonly, especially given that America at this time was still, if you think back to the Puritans, we're not as religious as the Puritans, but we're still pretty religious. The allusions in this text will be mostly biblical. So you're looking at allusions that reference Bible stories that everybody would be familiar with. You could also find maybe a quote by, King George. Yeah, King George would be a good one. We learned about him in the last unit. So somebody that everybody at that period would recognize right away. As you read, note the ways that Lincoln uses rhetorical devices to impact the audience's understanding of his argument and achieve his purpose. The notice and note in the annotations that you're going to be doing today will actually help you. It'll guide you to this, to look for these things and where you should be looking for them. So make sure that you're actually looking. Now, I put the critical vocabulary up here. You should probably throw these in your notes. They're just here as an aid for you. You don't have to do anything for them, but I am going to pronounce the words so that you're not struggling and saying something wrong. So the first one, engross, to completely engage the attention or interest of. The second one is venture, to risk or dare. The next one is deprecate, to express disapproval. And the last one is wring, to obtain through force or pressure. So that's it for the notes, guys. If you have any questions for me, please don't hesitate to shoot me an email, and happy reading.